All right, let's get started with some while loops. This is the first of two types of loops that we're going to cover in this module, module 5 of the class. And it builds upon some of the things that we learned last module with if-then branching or if-else branching. Let's review that real quick. So the first control structure is branching with an if, elif, and else statement. This one in particular tests to see if x is equal to 2 on the first line. If it is equal to 2, then it prints x equals 2. If it's not, then it goes on to this line, which says elif x is equal to 3, then print x equals 3. For any other value of x, including strings or any other data type, it will print x equals something else. Now remember, if we have statements that could both be true here, like x equals 2 and y equals 4, those could both technically be true. However, if x equals 2, it's going to execute this code and skip the rest of this branch because you can only choose one branch. So you need to make sure, I think it's really important that as you're building these things out, these conditions should always be mutually exclusive, meaning they can't both be true because they can't both be used. So making them both possibly true is not a great idea. Both possibly true at the same time. So when we're talking about loops, it's a very similar structure, you'll see. It starts with the word while, and then we have some expression that evaluates to true or false, and then a colon, and then the lines or the code block beneath that is indented. In this case, while true, using the Boolean value of true, obviously, no matter what the variables are or what else is going on in the program, while true is always going to be true because true is true. So it's going to just print this forever and ever. It'll print this line, and then when it reaches the bottom of this code block, it will go back and test to see if that condition is still true. So while this is true, it will print this. So I will print this until my computer burns up, which will be a very long time. Another way to do a while loop is to set up some kind of a condition that will no longer be true after a while. So in this case, I start with the value of x equals 1. And then my test condition is while x is less than 4, do this stuff. So while x is less than 4, first print it's still true. And then do this, which does what to x? Adds 1. So x starts at 1. It says while x is less than 4, x is less than 4, so that comes to true. Print this, add 1 to x, so x is now equal to 2, right? So then it goes back and it says, okay, is x still less than 4? Yes, it is. Prints this, adds 1, and continues until x is no longer less than 4. So the question is, how many times will it print that before it stops? Is 4 less than 4? No, then it's a false. So when x is equal to 4, it will stop, but how many times will it print before it's equal to 4? 3. Yeah, it'll print 3 times. Because the first time it prints, x is equal to 1, then it adds 1, x is equal to 2, it'll print x is equal to 3, still less than 4, prints, and then right here, x becomes 4. So it comes back to this statement, while x is less than 4, it says no, it's not less than 4, and it will go on to whatever code is beyond the loop, or it will terminate the program if there's nothing left. But it will print it's still true 3 times. Here's another way to look at the problem. This accomplishes the exact same thing, but in a different way. So I start with x equals 1, and I have a while true, which will run forever unless I tell it to stop. So immediately I increment x plus equals 1. So right here, x becomes 2. It will print this, and then it will check to see, using an if statement, if x is equal to 4, then do something called break. Anytime I have a break, it will break me out of whatever loop I'm in. If I'm in a loop, inside a loop, inside a loop, it will just break the innermost loop. So each break is good for one loop. We'll get you out of that loop. So this will iterate until x equals 4, and then when x is equal to 4, it will break the loop and stop. It will print the exact same thing as this code, but in a different way. The reason it's important to understand how this break structure works is because there are lots of scenarios where that is a more useful construct than doing it this way. It gives you a lot more flexibility and allows you to break under multiple conditions. Here's another command called the continue command. It's similar to break in that it affects the function of the loop, but what continue says is stop executing the code where you're at and go back to the beginning of the loop and retest that condition. So if in this loop, as it's looping through, at the moment when x is equal to 2, it will continue and it will not print this. So it will print it for 1, it will print it for 2 or 3, and then 4. Actually, it won't print for 1 because it starts at 1 and it becomes 2 immediately and skips that line. So it will skip anything after the continue while it's still in the loop. It will skip the rest of that code block. Continue is less frequently used, but it's good to know that it exists. So for our sandbox challenge today, we're going to get right into it, but I'm going to show you a little bit. We're going to go back to the game where we guess the computer's secret number, except we're going to approach it with a little more sophistication this time. We want to give the user 3 tries to guess. We want to give them a you got it right message if they guess right, and a thanks for playing if they guess wrong 3 times. And if you can keep track of the numbers that the user has guessed, that's sort of a bonus challenge. So if you can keep track of the numbers they've guessed so far and give them feedback, like on the first guess, they won't have any numbers, but on the second guess, you can say you've guessed number 1. And on the third time around, you can say you've guessed numbers 1 and 6, but those were wrong. If you can figure that one out, that's a good bonus challenge. And I've actually got a few other bonus challenges that I want to show you too as we go through this. But I'm going to show you a little bit of the setup for this. Let me see if I can make this text any bigger. I don't think I can. Yeah, I don't think so. All right. So the first thing we want to do, and this is, by the way, I'm going to start telling you some more stuff about how to set up programs in an effective way. The first thing I always like to do in a Python program is import whatever modules we need. Now, we haven't talked much about importing modules, but in this one, we do know that we need the random number module. So I'm going to say import random up here at the top. Notice it turns gray and underlines it. That's just to let me know that I'm importing a module that I haven't used yet. The reason that I'd like to import modules up at the top of a program is that way it enables me to keep track of modules that I'm using, modules that I'm not using, modules that I've imported, things like that. That way there's no question. If I have these sprinkled throughout my program, kind of at an as-needed basis, then it's really hard to find and it's very disorganized. I think an organized program saves you a lot of time in the long run. So the first thing I like to do is set up my import statements. And then if there are any variables that I use all throughout my program, a lot of times these are referred to as global variables because they're available throughout my program. There are a few that I want to set up for this program. First one I want to do is I want to create a variable that determines how many tries, how many guesses do they get. So I'm going to call it an int user. No, I'm going to say int total tries. And I'm going to set it to 3 right now. So the user is going to get 3 guesses total. And I also need an int to keep track of how many tries the user has had so far, because I need to be able to keep track. How many times have they guessed? The third global variable that I want to create here is the computer's secret number, because I generate that once at the beginning of the program. The computer has that secret number for the entire thing. So I'm going to say secret number equals, and this is where I use the random module, and I use the rand int function, and I give it 1 and 10 as my low end and high end numbers for the random. So that will generate a random number between 1 and 10 and assign it to int secret number. Okay, now I'm ready to get into the rest of the program. So the first thing I'm going to do is show the UI to welcome the user. I'll explain the rules. Now, the rules, I can get a little more sophisticated here. It says try to guess my integer, you have 3 tries. If I change that to an F string, I can actually put, I don't want to do the secret number. That would be bad. I can put the total tries variable right into the string there, and then all I have to do is change the variable up here if I wanted to give them 5 tries or whatever. So now, once I've explained the rules and welcomed them to the game, now I'm going to start what's called the game loop, which this loop is going to go through until either the user guesses correctly or they've guessed 3 times. So those are 2 possible conditions where the loop will stop, and I don't know which one it will be. Now I could create a complex test here using while, something like while I could say the total guesses is less than the number of guesses or the user's number of guesses, or the user guesses right. But that kind of logic is too much for this. So I'm just going to go while true. And in my mind, I'm going to know this is just going to keep looping until I break out of that loop. So the first thing I want to do is get the user's guess. Int user guess equals, I want to go input okay. And now what I would do if I was very careful here is I would first check to see that what they entered was a number, and then I would convert it to an int. But I'm going to take the lazy way out because this isn't about converting strings, and I'm just going to convert it to an int right here on the fly. So right when they put it in, and if they put in a letter, it's going to break everything. But we're going to focus on the loop today and not checking user input. So the first thing I want to do is I want to check and see if the user is the same as the computer's number. So I'm just going to say if int user guess equals int secret number, then print you guessed right. and then I will break. Because if they guess right, they don't need more guesses, right? So if they guess right, the break statement kills that loop, moves on past it. So if it's not right, so it would be the else condition here. Now, if I wanted to, right here at the end of this line, it's going to end the line. The next line will print below it. But if I wanted to print a blank line after this, I'm going to use what's called an escape character. And I do an escape character by putting in a backslash and N for new line. So that'll put an extra line below that and space out the input vertically before it asks for the next thing. Now, the next thing I need to do after they guess wrong is take int user tries and increment it by 1. So it's going to, after they guess wrong, they'll have used up one of their 3 tries. Once I do that, I need to check and see if they've used their full number of tries. So I use another if statement, int user tries equals int total tries. So if it equals the total number of tries that they're allowed, then you are all out of tries. And game over. So I'll break at that point because once they've used up all their tries, they can't try anymore. And so this is after the loop. Notice I'm unindenting all the way back out to here, which is outside the loop. It's the main thread of the program. I'm going to say, thank you for playing. Okay. I might want to say something like, I could give them another chance to play here by putting another loop around this that says, would you like to play again? Yes or no. And if they say no, I'd break out of that loop. I could say, you guessed right or wrong, depending on if they guessed right or wrong, and then say it only took you X number of tries. I could tell them how many tries it took. On this, I could say, here are the numbers you've guessed so far if I record those. So or I could say you guessed too high and too low, like we did last time, right? By measuring whether their guess was higher or lower. So there's lots of ways that I could tweak this game to make it a little bit more fun. But here's the most basic level of that. Okay, so here's my guess number between 1 and 10. 4, try again. 6, 8, and then I was all out of tries. So if I run this in the debugger, then I'm going to guess a number between, actually, let me put in some breakpoints here so we can see this. I'll put in a breakpoint right here so we can capture those. Okay, so here's my breakpoint, and I know it's too small for you to see, but this is a good way to test if you're right because it tells you what the secret number is. In this case, the secret number is 5. The total tries is 3. The user guess is 2, which is what I just entered. And then user tries is 0 because it's just at this point right here, it's going to decide whether I'm right or whether it increments again. So I'll step into that. Okay, so it says, I guess 2. That's not it. Try again. Guess a number between 1 and 10. I'm going to guess 5, knowing that that's the correct one. And breakpoint again. So let's step past that breakpoint. And then it says, you guessed right. Thank you for playing. So far my program is working in a very basic way. And this is what I'd like you to shoot for at a minimum. If you'd like a little bit of extra challenge, try and build some of those other features into the game, guessing high or low, giving them feedback on what they've guessed so far, telling them how many guesses they have left. That's a good one to do. And that sort of thing. And also maybe creating another loop outside of this one where they can play again and the computer will guess a different number. So you can do that. You could even, if you do that, you could even keep track of how many wins the person, what their winning record is, how many times they've guessed the correct number before running out of tries. So lots of things you can do. And so we're getting into a more complex structure where we have loops and we have if-else statements inside the loops and using break statements to break out of those. We will learn about another type of loop in our next lecture and also cover the assignment for this week. This is a sandbox assignment and the code is already in this week or this module under the sandbox guess the number game. You can grab the code right here and that way it'll give you some structure to get started with what we just covered. Any questions about this today?